Thank you, Senator Lambie. Senator Lyons.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President. Well, here we have a government backed up by their business mates talking up a massive hike in the GST, a whopping 5% hike, and not just a hike, but talking about broadening the base of the GST, a big, fat new tax. On a day when the Financial Review, Mr Acting President, has a headline that Chevron paid only $248 tax on a $1.17 billion profit. The government tries to tell us it wants to have a conversation about tax reform, but the subtext of that is it's all about the GST. It is all about imposing a big hike in the GST, a hike to 15%, when Chevron pays a measly, a tiny $248 on a massive $1.7 billion profit tax. Well, it's easy to see. It is easy to see just who the Turnbull government is looking after here. They are looking after, as usual, their mates at the big end of town, the mates that line their coffers with donations. That is who they are looking after. Because if Mr Turnbull was true about saying we have to have a tax system that's fair, you would never contemplate introducing a GST, because a GST is never fair, and you certainly can't compensate your way with a GST to make it fair. It does not work. And again, it just demonstrates how out of touch the Turnbull government is. They've changed their leader, but their harsh, cruel policies inflicted upon working Australians, on Australians on benefits, on families, on young peoples, remains in place. For someone who works in aged care, an aged care worker, or an early childhood professional, on poverty wages, on about $21 an hour, and in relation to an aged care worker struggling to get full-time employment, working about 30 hours a week, how does an increase in the GST provide prosperity for those workers? Of course it doesn't. It just drags them further into poverty. And what else do we know? Oh, they want to have a conversation about penalty rates. They want to reduce Sunday penalty rates. So along with increasing the GST by 5%, they want to slash the Sunday penalty rate, because somehow, again, their business mates can't survive. I heard the BCA, Jennifer Westacott, on the radio the other day, and I challenged her to walk a day in the shoes of a low-paid worker. And it should be mandatory for all those in government to do the same, because if they did, talk about GST reform, a big fat hike to 15%, or a reduction in penalty rates, would suddenly disappear from their conversation, because, quite frankly, they could not survive on those wages. They could not survive. So along with ripping off the Sunday penalty rate, we're just having a conversation, they say. Well, we know with this government, the minute they start talking about something, their intention is to do it. It is to do it. And we've had government member after government member come in here and say, yes, let's knock down the Sunday penalty. And we've had government member after government member talk up why it's good to raise the GST. Will you tell that to someone on $21 an hour who's heading up a family? You tell that to a pensioner. You tell that to someone on an unemployment benefit, because it makes no sense. And the only people talking up a hike in the GST to 15% and broadening out the base are the big end of town. And if you'd heard the BCA on the radio the other day, you'd think somehow the business could no longer survive because they're so desperate for more tax relief when we have Chevron paying $248 tax on $1.7 billion profit. Let's have that conversation. So when we hear the words, we need to have tax reform in this country, let's start there. Let's start there. But no, they don't want to start there, because they are looking after their mates at the big end of town. Because it's the Turnbull government and the big end of town that are talking about the GST. It is not Labor. We are opposed to this. We've always been opposed to an increase in the GST, and we will continue to be. And why is that? because we understand that this is a regressive tax. It hits those who spend all of their income on their daily living expenses, something that the Liberals and the Nationals do not understand. They don't understand people scrape to buy a litre of milk. They don't understand that people scrape to buy fresh fruit and vegetables. So yes, we're up for a conversation on tax reform. Let's start at the big end of town. Let's ask ourselves how Chevron managed to only pay $248 on a profit of $1.7 billion. That's a disgrace, Mr Acting Deputy President, but you won't hear those opposite talking about it because they're the ones that are advising them. Their business advisors are at the big end of town and their business advisors want to just increase their profits at the expense of working Australians, of those on benefits and Australian families. It's a disgrace and Labor does not stand for an increase in the GST.
Thank you, Senator Lyons. Senator